As you leave Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum, you will come to a beautifully restored 19th century tobacco barn on your right. It is now used as storage by Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum. The features that reveal its age are the windows on the lower right side. This shows that stripping the tobacco leaves, a very tedious task, was done inside the barn. Separate stripping rooms outside of barns came along in the 20th century. The windows would allow people to look outside during the long hours of work, and most important, the light coming in would allow them to see the leaves. Listen to farmer and judge Perry Bowen as he talks about both the labor and science of curing and stripping.
Somebody has to get up in the barn and hang it. Get up in the barn, you had to have somebody that didn't mind standing up there on the poles that far from the ground. A lot of people afraid of heights, didn't want to get up in the top of the barn. And secondly, you generally try to find somebody who was tall, because the person who hangs the top generally stands on the plate and hangs 2 or 3 poles above it. And if you're tall enough to do that without having to hop up and down, hanging goes a lot faster. So it always fell my lot to hang the tops of the barns, and I generally kept 2 or 3 shirts. One down on the floor at the barn and one hanging on a tobacco stick out in the field. And I changed them as I went, but always hung without a shirt on, because up under our roof in August in this part of the country it is extremely hot. Of course, you don't get much air up there because all the air doors are below the plate. But all in all, I always enjoyed hanging the top because at least I didn't have anybody above me dripping on me, and all the dirt and water off the tobacco sticks fell on the fellows below me. But it was awfully hot. It was a hot job. It goes through several stages of curing. First, dyes. The leaves hang straight now along the stem. And then they turn yellow, golden yellow. Then they gradually start to change color as the chlorophyll dies and disappears. It turns first yellow, and then whatever the color left in the leaf becomes edible. And you want it to look good, but most of all, you do not want it to rot. And if you have all, as you sometimes do in August, a couple of weeks of fog and hot, humidity up around 90%, fog blowing in the barn, it will just rot like a pile of leaves in your yard would rot if you stack them in a pile. And that is a very sad thing. And then you've got your labor of cutting and hanging it, and it's going to rot. And if you survived that, and your tobacco cured with any sort of color at all, then you knew pretty well that you didn't have any more problems.
The cool mornings and warm sunshine of October and the rainy nights of November make the leaves the various shades of yellow, brown, and dark red desired by tobacco companies for fine smokes. Stripping tobacco is monotonous work, but most people who do it seem to like it. The monotony of the work is easy to see. Understanding why the work is gratifying is not so apparent. Once tobacco is hung in the barn to cure for a couple of months, it is taken into the stripping room. It is the same repetitive handwork, hour after hour, day after day, usually for weeks. Next, we'll hear the University of Maryland Extension tobacco specialist, David Conrad, the author of the Tobacco Handbook, talk about the science of aroma.
Down south, the flue-cured tobacco types, when they're cured with heat. That process of curing that tobacco with heat fixes sugars and carbohydrates in the leaf. It fixes it. It doesn't burn out. And you can smell that tobacco and have a sweet smell to it. Air-cured tobacco, burley type and Maryland leaf, the process of air curing, those carbohydrates and those sugars are burned up through the process of curing. The organisms and the biological processes within the leaf burns up the sugars and the carbohydrates. So our sugars and carbohydrate levels are low. Okay? You don't get a sweet flavor with Maryland. It doesn't smell sweet. What you do get is the tobacco aroma. I noticed this morning down in the stripping room that when I went into the stripping room down there, I thought it smelled more like tobacco this week than it had during the fall.
For all that, the stripping room is a sort of community center. There are no strangers in the stripping room, and as the day goes by, there aren't many secrets either. Conversation is almost continuous, joking and gossiping. A wood, coal, or kerosene stove burns to keep out the late autumn chill. Neighbors stop by from time to see what's going on, to talk, and maybe to help out. Many times, entire families work in the stripping room. It's something young and old can do together. The leaves are graded into categories such as trash, lugs, light, dark or red, tips, and green. Usually one person is assigned to strip each grade, and the stalk is passed down the stripping table from one person to another. The most experienced stripper starts the process by taking off the trash. At the far end of the table, the youngest children just learning to grade tobacco strip the tips and green. By the time the stalk gets to them, the only leaves left are tips or green. After sorting and grading, the leaves are tied into hands. A hand of tobacco could weigh from 1 to 3 pounds depending on the grade. A hand of tobacco is a group of leaves tied together at the stem end. The end is wrapped in another cured leaf. The hands were then laid in the tobacco basket in a circle with the stem ends pointing to the outside. The baskets were then loaded and taken to the tobacco warehouse where they were sold at auction.